telling him, he was like, how long have you been there? 12 years. And he says to me, that's his mom. That hurt. Yeah, that really hurt. Can be like somewhat peaceful, I guess. Like, I don't know. Not the same. That I used to have to do. It's like long enough, but like if you left early enough, back at
Good morning, everyone. We're about to start soon. Sorry for the lateness, always technical difficulties. Although we're in the age of AI and technology, things sometimes don't always go as planned. But that's why you live life, right? That's why you adapt. So we'll wait for more to come in. We do have another large group that will be coming in later in the presentation. They're running a little late. They had a meeting that they had to attend to that was an impromptu meeting. So make apologies for that. Okay. Great. So welcome. Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. This is day 2 of the Global Korean Entrepreneurship Forum. I'm Winslow Sargent. I am the immediate past chair of ICSB. Lee, we had a great kickoff session yesterday. Appreciate those of you who were here. Those of you who are not, you missed a treat. I'm sure that it's on video, or there are ways that we should be able to, for those that were not here, that you should be able to see what was discussed. And but now we're on to day 2, and we have a great agenda for this morning, where, like I said, we have another group that will be coming in. They had a meeting that they had to attend to. But in the meantime, we'll get things started off. The first speaker for plenary session 5 is Mr. James Rhee. But before I have him up here to speak, I'm going to ask Ms. Yvonne Park to give an introductory remarks to introduce him. Is that the way you want to do this? So I'll pass the baton to you, and then you will likewise bring up Mr. James Rhee. So please come up here so that, because we're live casting, and so you can be seen, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Actually, we're supposed to have a large group of Korean audience, so James suggested me to introduce about him before speaking Korean, but I don't think this group needs that. But,
Well, we have some.
what do you think, James? Do you?
just do it because we're screening
Okay.
too.
All right, all right.
Going to Korea.
Okay. Hello, I'm Yvonne Park, freshman. I'm the president of Freshman Herald Korea, and I'm very honored to introduce James Lee at this very special GW Global Korea Entrepreneurship Forum. I was fortunate to met him in 4 years ago, and I have witnessed the very exciting journey of James Lee. And I'm very pleased to introduce him as a new role model of Korean global Korean entrepreneur. So last month, I had a chance to meet with Professor Ki-chan Kim and Dr. Ayman in Korea, and we discussed about sessions. So we introduced about James. So Ayman was very happy to invite him to. Okay, so I will introduce about James in Korean shortly. So James Lee는 이제 여러분들이 보시면 이제 그런 말씀하세요. 작가냐, 안트러프러녀냐, 그럼 뭐냐? 그래서 굉장히 많은 이제 타이틀이 있는데요. 안트러프러녀이고 그 다음에 체인지 메이커고 지금은 그 임팩트 인베스트먼트 하면서 굉장히 의미 있는 다양한 이제 그 비영리 섹터에서 또 자문 활동도 하고 그런 다양한 그 활동들을 하고 있습니다. 제임스는 이민 2세세요. 그래서 부모님이 그 이민 가셔서 미국에서 태어났고 그 다음에 이제 그 하버드에서 이제 학부랑 로 한 다음에 재미있게도 하버드 로스쿨 나온 다음에 역사 그 고등학교 교사를 잠깐 했어요. 그리고 이제 우연히 이제 사모펀드 쪽에 들어가게 돼서 사모펀드 영역에서 투자자로서 굉장히 오랫동안 활동을 했고요. 오랫동안 이제 그 다양한 이제 투자 활동을 하면서 그 하나의 이제 투자했던 그 포트폴리오 회사에 애슐리 스튜어트라는 회사가 있었고요. 그 회사가 파산 위기에 있었던 이제 그 패션 회사였는데 그 파산 위기 20년이나 된 회사가 이렇게 파산되는 게 너무 안타깝다 이런 생각을 가지고 투자자였지만 CEO를 내가 한번 6개월 정도 해보겠다. 그래서 그렇게 해서 이제 CEO를 맡게 됐습니다. 근데 이제 몇 년이 지나면서 그 애슐리 스튜어트에서 정말 와이파이도 안 돼 있는 그런 굉장히 올드한 스타일로 운영되는 그 회사를 몇 년 만에 정말 굉장히 제임스 리의 그런 시크릿인 kindness and math라는 그런 경영 철학을 가지고 이 회사에서 많은 변화를 만들어냈습니다. 그래서 전국적으로 관심을 많이 받고 또 이 회사 안에서 또 벌어진 많은 이제 변화들을 이제 그 회사를 몇 년 운영하다가 이제 또 투자자로서 이제 엑시트를 하고 그 케이스들을 워낙 이제 많은 비즈니스 케이스로도 그 하버드 비즈니스 리뷰에서 나오고 많은 곳에서 이제 그 소개가 됐는데 이 활동들을 좀 책으로 정리하자 해서 4월 9일 날 레드 헬리콥터라는 이름으로 책이 출간됐고요. 일주일 만에 그 전국의 베스트셀러 난픽션 쪽에서는 1위하고 지금 10위 안에 그 베스트셀러가 됐습니다. 그래서 이제 이 책은 어떤 삶에 대한 거, 그다음에 비즈니스에 대한 거, 이런 그 변화 관리에 대한 굉장히 많은 그런 어떤 삶의 지혜를 담고 있어요. 그래서 오늘 책 사인회도 또 하는 거로 알고 있습니다. 그래서 지금 한 1시간 정도의 프레젠테이션 준비했는데요. 만나보시면 어떻게 그 변화를 일으켰는지 그런 체인지 매니지먼트에 대한 다양한 이야기도 들을 수 있고요. 그 다음에 이제 그 삶을 바라보는 지혜, 그 다음에 안트러프러니로서 또 어떠한 또 한국인으로서 이 글로벌 무대에서 활동하는 안트러프러니로서 어떤 생각을 갖고 있는지 또 앞으로 계획 같은 것도 또 들을 수 있습니다. 그러면은 이제 직접 제임스 리를 초대해서 듣도록 하겠습니다. Over to you, James. Thank you.
Stood 80%. I did. So I heard TikTok and I said, 일어나세요. Yeah, okay. Hi, everyone. I always apologize for not being able to do this in Korean. I like to say that I am fluent, I think, in the emotions of Korean and about 60, 70, 80% listening. And then the 얘기하는 거 the bottom is that it's not good. So for those of you who don't speak Korean, what my friend Yvonne just said is basically he's born here. His parents immigrated here. He's kind of both American and Korean, and he's done a ton of different weird things. And he has a few stories to tell, not about the what, but about how. And so really how I'm going to present today is more important than what I'm going to say. At MIT, I teach in like their process. It's the process of thinking, of feeling, and then how do you do it? Right? How do you actually do it financially, emotionally, sociologically? So just watch how I do it, and we can talk about what maybe over lunch. Okay? All right. So bibimbap, you know? So yesterday I spent some time listening just to everything. We talked about geopolitics, the existential definition of what it means to be human, what leadership is, what's the future going to be, how does money fit in, how do people fit in? I asked the question about women yesterday and about birth rates. And these are all the same question, I think. So at MIT, you know, we talk about systems thinking. And what happens in a lot of countries and companies, we tend to stop doing systems thinking. We get a little lazy and we start thinking vertically. Systems thinking by nature is horizontal, and it looks like bibimbap. You put all the ingredients in, and sometimes the ingredients together, they taste better. All right, so it's no use eating each ingredient in bibimbap. You sort of go like this. And in Yvonne's introduction of me in Korean, for those of you who don't speak it, this is what she said. Basically, she said, he's bibim. So I am a teacher, I'm a private equity investor, I run a company, I'm a founder, I used to teach high school, I'm Korean and American. And I went to law school to learn policy to help people, but I've managed billions of dollars of money. And I think what's important that you're going to hear, I think we have to think about different definitions of what language means. I don't think language means just English, Korean, French, Italian. Language means financials, legal, music, physics, history. I mean, these are languages. Okay, and I think increasingly what worries me is that we are starting to speak the language of just AI, which is just 0 and 1. And what you're going to hear in my remarks is that my process involves the number 2, which is most likely like bibimbap. It's not 0 or 1, it's both. I think that as a humanity and as we think about planning in the future, we should be reminded of that. No one laughed at my bibimbap. That's funny, right? I mean, that's very funny. Okay. And so this is what I said in one of the quotes from my book. My life has been about convergence, different peoples, different experiences, different travels, always in a position of learning. I love being the new person in a room and just listening. And I always watch how people react to that. I generally try not to come into any situation with a preconceived idea or notion and assume that I have the answer. I actually don't think that's what leadership is. I think leadership really listens. And so we're going to talk about how kindness, which is not niceness, right? It's humanity. Let's just talk about agency. And math, which is not accounting, right? Accounting is completely made up by humans. Math is science. Kindness and math are laws of nature. They transcend humans. And so with kindness in math, it requires a certain degree of humility that you do not know, we do not know all the answers. And that, as Ray Dalio more eloquently wrote in his book, the 80 years that we've been living for the past 80 years, there's a cycle. It happens every 100 years. There's a cycle of geopolitical dominance, monetary policy, and usually human beings are not disciplined enough to live together in a constructive and monetarily sound way. And that unfortunately, we usually have war. And where we are right now going forward, we are in a different situation, right? War, it's already happening, but real world war could be end of humanity. And so it's a very unique situation we're in. Yesterday, we talked a lot about entrepreneurship. So the theme of this conference is, what can entrepreneurs bring to the table to provide solutions? And specifically, it's also what can Korean and Americans do as entrepreneurs to provide the solutions. You will see by the end of the presentation, I really do believe, I'm not biased, maybe a little bit, that I think Korean culture and the history of Korea and the Maum of Korean people have a very important role to play globally if we are honest with ourselves, actually. Okay? So entrepreneur, I am very particular about language. Entrepreneurship to me is not business. It's just a way of living. It's a way of being. It's someone that imagines and that can communicate very well to people, and not in one way, but in 10 different ways. So everyone can hear it. And then you change Maum, not just this, you change in Korean, it's Maum, it's everything, right? Which is a very Korean and Asian thing, less Western. And then you solve the problem, and then you create something new. Right? So it's a creative process. Most great scientists are creatives. And we tend to, in this country in particular, I'm schooled here twice. Harvard does a good job separating creativity and empirical. And I don't think that's the right way to be approaching entrepreneurship or solution making in the future. So I'm going to do this, and this is a process. I'm going to do this in 4 little steps. And this is generally how I approach every new situation that I enter, whether it's in the business setting, education setting, investment setting, it doesn't matter for me. So this is what it looks like. And I think what happens after you do all this, there's massive change. My change tends to be very calm. It's not angry. There's not any yelling. It sort of happens. So in science fiction, you hear this word a lot, it emerges. It's much more in the realm of intuition. Things come. And maybe that's one of the reasons why this book is the #1 nonfiction book in the United States right now. No one expected it. And if you ask me, did I expect it? I will tell you modestly, no. But inside, I'll tell you I did expect it, actually. That it's tapping into something and it's allowing people, the zeitgeist to emerge. Okay, so it's very different than putting something in. You're letting things go like water. It just comes out. So the first story in a change, usually it requires a very simple, like kantanan story. So simple. And I think great faiths and religions do this so well. Or Einstein was brilliant at this, right? Theory of relativity. E equals mc squared. That's like done. It's so easy. Best answers are usually very simple. So when I approach companies or brands or people, I always try to find just what's the core simple story, the fractal. For me, the reason why the book is called Red Helicopter was because when I was 5 years old and my parents were struggling in this country, I came home with a toy red helicopter from Long Island Public School. And my parents, you know, in a very Korean way, they said, yeah, like, come here. Like, 일어나서 얘기해. Like, where did you get it? You can't take it. And I said, oh, Amma, I didn't do that. A family came to give it to me. And then my parents said, this is sad. My parents, my Korean immigrant parents said, we're very sorry. You're never going to fit into this country. We didn't know that in America, all the kids give toys in kindergarten. And I said, oh, Ma, but you didn't make a mistake. I'm the only one who got one. And then they got sort of annoyed with me. Do you remember, old Korean parenting when you have to stand up and the parents are asking you questions and you stand there like this? So you have to picture this boy looking at his father, right? Sort of old school Korean parenting. And my dad sort of getting frustrated with me and saying, how come you don't know why you got this helicopter? And I said, I don't know. And it was very upsetting to me. So later on, they found out why, and they brought me into the family room, and I had to stand up again, and they said, why are you sharing half your lunch with this boy? Your mom wakes up this is very Korean, right? Your mom wakes up every morning to make you this perfect lunch, and you're sharing, why are you giving it away? And I looked at my father and I said to him, because my friend never has food. And I thought I was going to just I thought I was in trouble because I looked at him like this and he looked at me, and it's one of the things, this is also very Korean. I think sometimes men, and maybe Korean men, sometimes we have a hard time expressing some emotion, but he was very emotional. And he said, oh, you think I'm mad at you? I'm not. Don't forget, this is what you're supposed to do. Even though we don't have a lot, this is how I grew up in Korea. I grew up in the war. This is good. This is Chung, right? This is Chung, this moment. It's the best part of Korean culture. On the other hand, my parents also wanted me to go to Harvard Law School, make a lot of money, do all the things. So they wanted both. Okay, so that's my simple story about why it's called Red Helicopter. But if you think about it, the simplicity and wisdom of a child, it's intuitive wisdom. And I got a lot of degrees, learned a lot of things, but as you get older, you can convince yourself into thinking to not share some food with the kid next to you. You can come up with 20 reasons why that boy is undeserving. But in reality, just solve the problem first, and then you can solve the real problem, okay? So that's the first rule of systems dynamics. It's what's the root cause? Not here, here. That's Chung. I think Korean people intuitively know what that is. Next step. Once you rinse the mind, then you have to take a real look at the truth. My whole life has been about finding the truth. As an investor, I want the truth. That's it. Tell me the truth. With my kids, like I think, how do you say in Korean? 정확하게, like, tell me the truth. And that's all you do. As a scientist, truth. I'm not interested in opinions. I want truth. What's the best answer? So once you think about this, like for me, after 53 years, this is the best I can come up with for you. Kindness, right? Which is the underpinning of Rousseau and Adam Smith's writings. When they came up with free markets and liberty, they wrote about secular kindness. Kindness is not niceness. It's about agency. It's human agency. That's why we have free markets. Math. I believe that these two things, when you operationalize them correctly in your life and in business, you create goodwill, which is what my TED Talk is about. So if you're a company, your brand value is goodwill, like you're literally creating an intangible asset. So these two things, if you foster agency and you do it mathematically honestly, and you create the operations that maximize both, in my investment career and as CEO, I'll show you, that's what you create. Tongue is dying in the world right now, and maybe a little bit in Korea. And I think that as you go forward, what's the most important asset that all of us companies, leaders need? Who are you going to trust? Trust is like going to be the number one thing. Can I believe you? Particularly with sort of just AI-driven manipulation of images. And this is what I believe, that kindness involves the exchange of agency, and that math quantifies the portion that can be quantified. That's it. And I'm talking to you as an investor, you cannot quantify everything. I think when you start trying to do that, and you say, oh, if you can't measure it with numbers, then it's not important. I think that's what's leading to a lot of social problems today. It's very difficult to measure what's the long-term effect of a declining population. Or when China put in the one-child policy, did they think 30, 40 years later about the ramifications of what one-child policy would be in China? They did not. I think the other thing, if you are with me, the other thing to think about, once you change perspective in change, I would rather be a helicopter than an airplane. So we are taught as leaders, companies, countries to be an airplane. You want to fly high, you want to be powerful, you want to go fast, you want to win. And that leadership means you are the CEO, you're the pilot, and you carry 600 people and you tell them what to do. In my career, particularly in change as an entrepreneur, that's not what innovative companies do. Innovative companies are helicopters. They have vertical lift, they can land anywhere. They can fly in 6 different directions, and you can't carry everyone. You have to teach people that their agency is their own. You need a teaching culture. It's a continuous improvement teaching culture. Great businesses promote agency. I can keep going on with this, but the other thing that helicopters can do that airplanes cannot do, they can hover. A lot of times we are, just because of, particularly with technology, and I think it's much more of a Western value system, and I grew up in this system. Action is something you can see. Non-action, which you cannot see, is not really considered action. Oftentimes, in my experience, not deciding, not thinking there's a problem, but letting problems play out, much more important. One of the things that's very difficult in systems dynamics, it's very hard for human beings to see 12, 15, 20 codependent variables to see. So that's why data visualization, which you're going to see me do, is very important to be able to show people what longitudinal change looks like. I'm going to skip this. This is the most quoted part of my TED Talk. I believe that kindness creates agency. Fundamentally, that's what I believe. Next. Simple story, wake people up. Are you sure? Like, these perspectives change, saying, are we really looking at the problem correctly? The next one is what I would call lateral and new connectedness, not vertical. During times of massive change, which we are as a society or as a company in an inflection point, great leaders, brands, bend space-time. Space-time is not linear, right? You bend space-time. How do you converge present, past, future? You can't get rid of everything in the past. You have to live in the present, and you have to see the future. You can't walk away from past. And as humans, you can't walk away from epigenetics either, which sadly, we may feel victimized by that, but that's just fact. Like, we have genes. Countries have histories. So this is a true story. This is what happened. It was 2013. I was 42 years old. I was in very tall buildings in Boston. I had 2 big Harvard degrees. I was making a lot of money. And I was basically in one of the most elite firms in Boston, in the world, private equity. My parents did this, right? And they didn't know what private equity was. My dad was a Seoul National University doctor. My mom, Seoul National University nurse. We took care of people. That's what the Ree family does, right? We care about people. That's why I taught high school after Harvard. I think I made $12,000 a year. And my dad said, oh, good. And there you go. Like, right? Don't you want to make money? And I said, Dad, like, I think that these systems, I want to learn and teach longitudinally, things will be okay. Don't worry. So at 42 years old, this is an example of change. And this is where I'm speaking to you now as a CEO. This is not as a theorist or academic or anything. Like, I did it. And there was a company called Ashley Stewart, which Yvonne talked about in Korean. Very simply, it was in the surface of it, it looked like a apparel business, fashion business with retail stores for Black women in this country. That's it. Pretty big business, hundreds of millions of dollars, not small, like nationwide, all over the country. And During that time, and this is where the Korean and the American now, I'm going to start converging this, my dad was dying. Okay, and so I'm thinking, like, dad's dying, there's this business. This business wasn't treated particularly well in this country. Does it surprise you? Not really, right? Access to capital markets? None. Access to tech? Not really. And it reminded me, the women reminded me of guess who? 우리 엄마. Like it just reminded me of her experience in this country. It was just not, it was so hard for my mother in this country. And most of the time she would come home and she wanted me to be like the hero. And I would say, Mom, you know, I think that you're the best leader I've ever met in my life. You take care of everybody, invest in everyone. You never ask for credit. Everything's better when you're around. That's what leadership is. And she never asked for credit. And so I left my life in Boston. I ripped up the life that my parents wanted me, and I showed up at this company and I said, 안녕하세요. Like, I'm James. Everything you think you need, woman, fashionable, retail executive, Black, I'm not. Just me. And then I did this and I said, and you know what else? No one else in the entire world showed up. Just me. That was it. And then I said, I might be the least qualified person to run this company. I don't know anything. Help me. Tell me what's going on. For 22 years, you've lost money. You've been bankrupt twice. You're about to be liquidated. You have no Wi-Fi. Tell me what's going on. And so that's what happened. And so in that moment, all these faces converged. And I drew from everything: Korean experience, American experience, financial, everything, bibimbap. It just was this. And after 6 months, I went around to the world begging for money. And I asked them, I said, I think this business, it doesn't sell clothes. That the truth is that it's a place of like safety, of community, of mutualism, of comfort. And the clothes are just part of it. I did all the math from scratch. I said to the ladies at Ashley Stewart, we're going to build a brand new world. I basically said, we're going to build a country called Ashley Stewart. I'm going to explain that later, a whole system. And I went around, and I also said to the world, I studied 19th century politics, philosophy, economics. That was fundamental. Civil War, 1830s, industrialization. This is when the world, by the way, West met Asia, right? This is during that time period too. The world was converging in the early 19th century. The world was fighting. And back then, the telegraph was the technology that was going to solve all the world's problems. There's a lot of literature on the telegraph saying it's going to fix everything. Technology will fix everything. So that's what I studied. I said to the world, based on my readings of what I'm seeing, this is 10 years ago, the United States is entering into a period of civil war, that there's a big shift geopolitically, and that maybe like if you can sing and counterpoint some Western values and Asian values, maybe that's a winning strategy going forward for the world. And after 6 months, guess how many people showed up to fund the idea? Not one. So 6 months went by, I came home and I said I was going to go home. And my wife said, what are you going to do? And I said, I know we're right. And so I stayed. So I called up some favors and I raised some money and I showed up at bankruptcy court and I pulled the company into bankruptcy. And I said, I'm staying. And all during this time, my dad was dying, and I'm watching my immigrant parents, my very Korean parents, like they're like, what are you doing? And I said, oh, actually, I'm really remembering and learning how to be Korean. There was so much chung in this company. That was the only asset it really had, was the community, was the relationship. That's what it had. And then I was able to use, I had to use all the things I learned financially and legally at Harvard Law School to how do you monetize chung without ruining it? And so if you think about the history of Korea, like Korea, when my parents left Korea, all it had was chung. It was devastated. And then maybe for the last 50 years, Korea has really economically, financially, technologically wow, right? I don't know if many other countries could have done what other than Koreans, but maybe right now this process is similar. How do you remember that past and also apply the future to create a better present? Okay. And so this is what I did. Sometimes we sit in these rooms and all we want to use are PowerPoint presentations and Excel spreadsheet. I train McKinsey's engagement managers many times. They always ask me to talk about transformation. Why? Because you cannot transform things in a 2x2 chart. It doesn't work like that. It's not theory. So this is what I played for the women of Ashley Stewart. I said, here is the business plan. That's what I play. I said, we're going to build an entire world and business plan and quant structure that does that. I said, that's the essence of this brand. Does that make sense? And I said, all the numbers, legal documents, I got them. We're not going to be imprisoned by them. This is what we're going to do. And when we talk about communications later, right, I'm speaking multiple languages right now. If you can't tell, I'm a bit of a suppressed musician, and that's going to come up later, okay? And so when you think this way, and you sort of let you're able to think, I'm going to repeat again, measurement, accounting is made up. Okay, I'm not saying I hate account. I know accounting. I know how to build massive spreadsheets. Accounting's made up. All the things it doesn't measure. Most of the things accounting doesn't measure are human assets because it's immeasurable. So they say, oh, it's not important. And even though we know it's important, I know I'm like you, like you're busy. Where are the numbers? 4% growth, 2. Right? So we all over rely on GDP, even though Simon Kuzmet said never rely on GDP for a nation's wellness, but we still use it. We all say, oh, GDP is up. We never talk about inflation adjusted, like real terms. GDP is up, but we never talk about the balance sheet. It's mathematically untrue. And so that's what we did. And so here are some things I measured at Ashley Stewart. Like I measured childbirths. Before I got there, no one was having babies. Why? Not surprising, right? The women were maybe overworked, stressed, worried about the financial health of the company, didn't feel good about having family, tired, too much. So I measured babies. I wanted our employee base to have babies. And if you think that way, if that's a goal, it requires you to change 10, 15, 20 very small policies that substantiate that desire. Does that make sense? You have to look at leave. You have to look at how people get onboarded back. You have to make sure she's comfortable leaving her job and that there's someone else to fill her shoes while she's gone. It crosses departments laterally. Here's another one, workers' compensation. We had the worst record in workers' compensation in the history of like any company. I couldn't get insurance. I almost had to put the company back into bankruptcy because we couldn't operate legally. Insurance data is where kindness and math meet, right? It's math and behavior. Actuarials, I love actuarials. Remember, I'm a quant guy, zeros and ones. Actuarials, sometimes if you're not careful, you get trapped by history. By definition, actuarials are history, and they're predicting future behavior with history. I want you to know within 2 years, we broke every actuarial table they had, and they came into our office and they awarded me like the biggest award in insurance industry history, which is not sexy. This is not like winning the Oscars, right? It's a bunch of actuarials. And they asked me, how did you do this? And I said kindness and math, because Any leader knows that you have to have very good operations to tie these two concepts together. Workers' compensation was down 90 to 99% every year. And I took all the savings from the money, which is waste, and I paid people more. They basically got a synthetic dividend. Does that make sense? So even if you didn't own equity, you owned your behavior and you were paid. This is what it looked like by the end. In the beginning, for the first 2 years, no one knew where we were, where I was. We just was alone doing it. Slowly, this laughingstock company with no Wi-Fi, I ended up chairing the innovation committee of the National Retail Federation. That's me with the CEOs of Macy's and Walmart. That's Carla Harris and Morgan Stanley. That's the CEO of Price Waterhouse. This company that had no Wi-Fi, I keynoted Dreamforce on behalf of Ashley Stewart in 3 years. We were one of the most high growth, quote, tech companies all of a sudden from scratch. And then all the celebrities came too, and they said, we want to help you. And they would help us for nothing. So for those of you who think goodwill doesn't have monetary value, I think we probably got $50 to $100 million of brand marketing support for zero. And it kept spreading those 7 years. And all of a sudden, we were this brand name that no one knew or laughed about. We were putting brand names like Apple and Google, and JP Morgan Chase put me on their one of their satellite boards to help with their mortgage policy. And so that's Colin Powell, Condi Rice, and I represented Ashley Stewart. All of this change happened quickly, but it never felt rushed and it didn't feel angry. It was very calm. We just focused on what was truth and we got the job done. We liberated ourselves from accounting. Next, when you do things right, the fractal is right, truth spreads. It does spread. So here's your next story. After 7 years, and Ashley Stewart sold 3 times. It was financially very successful. That's not the point of this conversation, but we were right. My mother died year 7. So dad died year 4, mom dies year 7. And it was time. For me, it was just, and I took some time off. And now the world is starting to understand what we did. Like, do you really think what we did was sell clothes? This is systems redesign. We built and showed a world that can be. 40% of our demand at Ashley Stewart online ended up being white women. And I used that money. We ran a capital surplus with the white communities. Most businesses do not do that in Black neighborhoods. Most brands take the money out. We put it in. So the whole design of the monetary system was enhancing the goals we wanted. So after 7 years, I took some time off, and then this is what's happening right now. It's spreading. TED Talk, Brene Brown, Simon Sinek, that's David Gardner, who founded Motley Fool right here in DC. Everyone's now understanding on their own terms. It takes people time, right? You can't yell at them. And so they're like, oh, and then one by one, it's all spreading. So it's spreading more. So this is historically significant, right? I am a Korean American man who is chairing entrepreneurship at the Howard University in Washington, DC. I don't usually talk about that explicitly. It's very important. I also teach at MIT. I might be one of the first, second, third people to have appointments at both schools. That's not normal. Because to me, the future of the world represents Howard and MIT. Can those two schools work together to design new systems? Makes sense to me. And it really does make sense to me that I'm Asian and that I'm Korean. It does make, I think for the Koreans, right? It makes it makes sense. And so slowly I've been having this realization of like, if you really want to know what happened, millions of Black women who they still are some of my closest friends. They really reminded me and taught me to be Korean during my 40s. That's fundamentally what happened. And so I'm sort of living my life like this, oh, makes sense, this. So this is spreading. It's being taught in the leading classrooms of this country. That's Ashoka, that's Juju Chang on ABC News. Then that's me addressing like 65,000 JP Morgan Chase employees about how to change. How do you promote agility in your company or in your organization? GAAP accounting does not measure agility. It does not. And so James, how do you teach it? How do you measure it? So that's what I've been lecturing on. It's spreading. So this is what I'm doing. Private sector, not for profit. That's me and Tina Biles Williams, who is a Black woman who founded the largest asset management firm in this country by a Black woman, $17 billion of assets. That's she and I keynoting CalSTR's pension investment conference. Unprecedented. And she asked me, she helped me. She said, you do so much work for women and for Black women. Can you say something about Asian women to CalSTRs? And I said, why, thank you so much, I will. Do you know which group in this country is the most underfunded for investment management? Asian women. And it never gets spoken about. And so I was given permission to say that by a very prominent Black financier female. And that's how partnership and allyship works. And so, this is me with the CEO, that's Ronald McDonald, but brands like McDonald's, right there, or the Principal Financial Group, they're starting to understand, they're like, oh, fundamentally, how do you change behavior? And I say, well, you have to speak a lot of languages and it has to be consonant. Accounting, finance, legal, branding, CogSci, it has to be consistent. And this is what I've been doing for the last 3.5 years. I've been going to cities. That's Mayor Bowser, right? You can see her, and there's Mayor Wu in Boston, and there's Yvonne at the Korean embassy, and then Topeka, Kansas, right? So I'm going to cities. It's like modern day Federalist Papers. If you ask me, is it business? I'd say yes. Is it civics? Yes, it's both. Because I think as we look at what's happening in Korea, like the economy cannot be divorced from civics. It doesn't work. And so this is what's happening now. Just to give you another example. On April 9th, this book released. I am a first-time author. I am an Asian man. They don't usually get published by things like HarperCollins in this country. And so this is the Boston Globe. They featured this story, the red helicopter story. And this is what happened the first week. It was the #1 nonfiction book in the United States. Korea, last fall, Wisdom House Publishing that did Jeff Bezos's, they bought it. So right now it's being translated in Korean. It'll be hopefully available September, October. And hopefully, perhaps if you really close your eyes, can you perhaps think about a 2-country movie? It's gonna happen, right? Or a 2-country educational program, like Mr. Rogers, modern day, that knows how to make money as our educational systems collapse. Because fundamentally, we're not teaching our children how to be agile. We're not giving them the tools to exercise agency. And that's what the curriculum I'm teaching at Howard and MIT is fundamentally foundationed on. This is what it looks like. Just to think about, for those of you from Korea thinking about relationships in the United States, it spreads like this. And so these are the people that released the podcast. Guy Kawasaki obviously worked with Steve Jobs on Apple, and he's the chief evangelist of Canva. People like that are recognizing right away the global nature of Red Helicopter. They're like, oh, we want to be part of that. And then you have articles about kindness. So really taking pains to define kindness correctly. And I've been introducing a lot of English-speaking and non-Korean-speaking people to the word chong. Like, if you listen to my TED Talk, it's about goodwill. But if I did it in Korean, I probably would have used the word chong. We did a kickoff at Howard University. This is Massachusetts, Washington, D.C. My former students all came back. It transcends race. This is me with at the Korean American Family Center that supports women in difficult relationships at home with their children. So all these books were donated to the moms so they could read it with their children. It expands into Nashville, Tennessee, which is, I don't know, very different from Massachusetts and New York politically, but no problems. This is happening on May 1st. The Korea Society is inviting me to make some remarks. And they want to talk about AI. And I said, do you want me to talk about AI? You have all these tech founders. And they said, oh yeah, we definitely do, because how can you have AI conversations without talking about civics? What are we doing? And I think as I look back, yesterday we talked a lot about words like change, distress, opportunity, right? I think when you allow opposites to coexist, in Korean, I'm sorry for my padam, but like Han, Chang, I think in Asian culture, it's much more natural to just focus on movement, less form. So my whole life these days, it's both, it's and. And it comes with utter calm, and it creates massive innovation and massive insights into change. The key, as Yvonne and the panel will talk about, is how do you get people to see it or hear it, and then to do it themselves. You can't tell people to do it. And when you do it right, it just spreads. And so for those of you with limited budgets, spreading is free. There's not a penny that gets exchanged. The chapters are arranged this way. So when you read the book, I brought books for you. This is the process. There's a certain way that the book is organized that maybe it will help you think about your own change process. I'm going to end with this. So I was wrong for most of my life. Again, I'm a bit of a musician. I am a creative. I used to think creativity was bad or weak. Oh, I'm very good at math. I do this. I manage money. Human beings create. That's the essence of humanity, right? That's the essence of wisdom, is to create. Women create life. It's life. And so I have a different view on creativity. During Ashley Stewart, I got very upset sometimes when people would say, it was so creative. And I would say, no, what are you talking about? It's quantitatively rigorous. I'm using physics formulas to do business. But then as I've been writing the book, I'm like, no, that's a very high compliment to be creative. I think Korean people, not all Korean people, but as a culture, is very creative. We've had to be. Right? We've had to be. But maybe if the creativity can come from a place of instead of survival, which the country has, but in terms of munificence, right? From a place of let's lead, let's show. Maybe that creativity will engender different types of innovation. And so I'm going to end this by sort of introducing a musical term. And for those of you who are musicians, maybe you on piano in particular, you've learned the word counterpoint. So Bach was the master of counterpoint. So counterpoint is when usually you have a melody and a harmony. In counterpoint, you have two melodies. This melody, and you can play one hand and it sounds beautiful. But if you compose it correctly, counterpoint emerges. There's a third melody that emerges from these two. And it creates something beautiful. And so whether you want to think about work, life, Korean, American, Western, Asian, I really believe counterpoint is a very useful framework for us to think about things. And so I'm going to end this with music. So the whole book, I'm going to play for you in 2 minutes. It's an original arrangement, and you're going to recognize both cultures. Perhaps this sound is what the future sounds like. And I think that's what change sounds like. Number two, that's Amazing Grace Nadidong like this. That was what happened. But three, I think more globally, I think that Korean leading on a global scale. I think that's what it sounds like to me. That's all I have. And I'll probably be in Korea in September, October, late September, October for Busan Film Festival. And I'd like to go to the Jinju entrepreneurship meeting. It all happens at around the same time, but very proud of my parents. They both not here anymore. I've got Korean genetics swarming in my body. And it's been really, for me, the last 10, 11 years, it's been enlightening to really understand what it means, the essence of being Korean. And I don't think that any of the things I have done in the last particular 10, 11 years in service to predominantly women and predominantly Black women, I don't think I could have done it without being Korean. And it makes me very optimistic about what the future could hold for different relationships and friendships. And just want to remind everyone in the United States, roughly 40 to 45% of this country is some level and spectrum of brown. It's not the America that Korea remembers from 1953. It's different. So I think there are different forms of language that have to be communicated. It's different. So I'm looking forward to sort of getting to know everyone better today. So thank you.
Hey, up here, that was fascinating. That was a fascinating presentation. I have to compose myself because I'm actually emotional from your talk. I am. So let me compose myself. You're a great speaker, by the way.
Thank you.
Dr. Keyshawn Kim, I'm glad that he's here. He has focused on something called humane entrepreneurship. And one of the things he said that stuck with me is that he's used the word Ubuntu. And I don't know if you know what the word Ubuntu means. It's a Zulu word, means I am because you are, or I am because we are. We're all linked. And just hearing your talk, I'm quite sure your parents would be very proud of you, but that was fascinating. And I'm quite sure that others in the audience are equally as emotional because as Dr. Keyshawn Kim has espoused, and he's really set it home in terms of human-centered entrepreneurship, that we do things that the human is at the center. We're doing things for humanity. Right? When we come up with new inventions, when we come up with new products, we're working to make the human condition better. Right? I mean, that's what it's all about. And that's what came out of your presentation. And you're such a great storyteller. Of course, you mentioned Stephen Yoon, which is a great actor from Walking Dead, and I think he was in another show with the comedian Ali.
With Beef.
Yeah,
Beef.
yes. I mean, he is a fascinating actor.
I've spoken with
Yeah,
him.
yeah.
But one of the things that happened, I didn't say this, but Ashley Stewart, so I just really listened well and just let her be. She had the answers. It wasn't me. I'm like, just, the answers. And then the thing that most moved me this is a very moving part of the book that I'll share. My mother and the women of Ashley, they met in my dad's way. And so as a CEO, tough guy CEO, I didn't tell anyone my dad died. And so they all came to my dad's funeral. They surprised me. And so you have to picture the women of Ashley Stewart walking up to my mother and saying, "Oh, Mrs. Reed, your son's a pretty good guy. Like you did a good job." And my mother in that moment realizing these women, they're me. That moment, age 44 at my dad's funeral, that was success. And so at this point, there's nothing no matter how chaotic, that's it,
Mhm.
that moment. And the thing that the women of Ashley, predominantly Black women, you know what they liked most about me? When I think back, it was my Koreanness.
Mhm.
Right? It was that they didn't care about the credential as much, more the what was here. It was
Yeah.
Chang.
Yeah,
And so they
Chang.
used to say soul. Like you have so much soul. I said, you know, in Korean it's Chang.
Sure.
And we would laugh, right?
Mhm.
And they would say, oh, ride or die. Then I would say in Korean, I'm going to butcher this. It's like, you know, nojuko, nadojuko. Is that, you know, that expression, nojuko, not? It's similar sentiment, right? Of like, yeah, let's go. Let's do this together. And so, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. And there are generations that will know of your story because you've impacted so many, right? And so you have children and grandchildren and many to come. That
Thank you.
what you've done is more than, you know, like you said, in the last so many years, the impact that you've made in communities is unknown in terms of its reaching. So I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that you have a book. We gotta take the pictures, but we also want to give you a presentation. We have an award
Ah, thank you.
to give you. And should we come out in front?
Yvonne, do you want to join? You invited me.
Yeah. On behalf of the Global Korean Entrepreneur Foundation. It's a
Thank you.
pleasure to come up here. I'm gonna also ask Dr. Because he is the chairman of ISSP. A mentor to me, like I said, when I think of doing entrepreneurship, when I think of going to, means a lot. So we have to get him up here. And let's take one more. Ron, I think since you, this is the board here. Well, let's give a big round of applause. What a way to start off the morning. Like I said, and we'll discuss how we can work together. Your books are here. Story is fascinating. Fascinating. Okay, what's next on the agenda now?
We have the panel.
Okay, next, we're gonna have a panel. We're actually gonna have a panel to discuss, as part of this. So next will be a panel session, building communication leadership for Korean companies in DC. And the participants are Yvonne Park, she's president of Fleischman Hillard Korea. You'll be the session chair and moderator. Mr. James Ree, we're gonna get you back up here. Founder of Red Helicopter. Professor Kishan Kim, co-chair of GKEF. He's also the chair of ICSB, and he wears many hats, and he's a fascinating leader. We're gonna have Dr. Jesse G, Chief Representative, Kita DC Office. Kevin Laylor, Chief Political Officer, DDC Public Affairs. Ron Bamer. Is it Beamer or Bamer? Okay, I just want to get it right. Vice President Fleischman Hillard, Washington, DC, who's also the session co-chair of Kita Fleischman Hillard. So what we need to do is, are we going to have the chairs here, or is it a you? How should we have it? Okay, so we're gonna have the chairs here. So those of you who have called, please make your way to the front. We need one more chair. And,
Let me change the.
and maybe Yvonne, she can
Yeah.
stand here.
Mhm.
Maybe Yvonne,
Yeah.
you can stand here and, yes, and, I'm looking forward to the session.
Log out.
Yeah, yeah. Have enough. Okay, you're going. We can do it later.
Yeah, I don't want to sound over everything.
Let's have it. But, did we have the name line up with phrases or is it so? Okay, all right, okay, great, okay, so it's all yours, take it away.
Hey, thank you, James, again for beautiful sharing of your story and our story
Yeah.
too, right? And it's difficult to switch from very emotional session to the very business and talk. But since we are in Washington, DC, I think what James mentioned at the end, how is really important, especially for professionals working in Washington, DC, representing countries or association or companies that the people in, it's all about people, right? So the authentic communication and with kindness and mess, I think would work very well for community in Washington, DC. Okay, so for the next 45 minutes or so, we will have a panel discussion on building communication leadership for Korean companies in DC. Yesterday, we discussed the challenges and opportunities for the Korean economy, as well as the intangible values of Korean entrepreneurship and communication leadership, and which are crucial for successful entrepreneurship too. So every speaker yesterday, I found that they addressed the importance of communication. This session will explore the real challenges that our Korean companies are currently facing. So we have invited special guests from Korean companies in DC office, and also the correspondents from Korean media. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you. Joining us today on the panel already Professor introduced. So next page. Okay, which, how can I? Oh. Here's our plan. So we'll start by discussing why our communication leadership is important now. And Dr. J will then give us a brief overview of the current status of investment and challenges we face. And following that, we will invite our panelists to discuss about how we can build a strategic communication leadership in the US. So Dr. J will discuss about the risk, but I just drew the risk heat map of the risk mainly from US-China libels and American first trend, and many of them seems high risk. And because a lot of companies are having similar challenges in this election year, now the battlefield of competition among global companies in public affairs, corporate public affairs. So this gives a very simplified overview of corporate public affair activities. We have an invited expert. I think it's really important time for the Korean companies doing business in the US and the experts, the representative of Korean companies working in DC, really understand the corporate public affair their capabilities and leverage those expertise into the strategic focus activities. So we'd like to hear from Dr. J about the challenges we face.
Okay, thank you for your introduction, and I'm so glad to be here today. And it's a great honor to make have a discussion. And I was really fascinated by James's presentation. And as Yvonne mentioned, I don't know how to switch from that emotional presentation to the business realities. But, the Korea International Trade Association represents more than 70,000 Korean trade companies, not only trade, but, these days there are so many Korean companies in the States, as you know. So before I, make a, short introduction of the Korean investment, I'd like to talk about, here in DC, there are less than 10 Korean big companies, as you know, the big conglomerates. They have their own DC offices, but just for the lobbying things and the government relationship, a little bit of the business. But we are here to how to connect with the people here in the States. So all the connectivity and then networking. But for the past maybe decades and decades ago, Korea and US was only connected with the trading goods, actually not many services. So we just, Korean companies, they just wanted to export more to the US market. But now, for the past 10 years, Korea invested a lot in the US. Now we are here, and actually not the Korean companies, the US companies, but their mother companies in Korea. So like immigrants, we have to think about how to to think or do business like in an American way, or sometimes we can think of James mentioned, we can mix with the Korean tongue and goodwill and kindness, the Korean way and an American way. That's I think that's the huge homework for the Korean companies at the moment. Okay, and then I will make a short introduction of all the numbers. You can see here how close the US and the Korea to each other. These are numbers. Last year, the US imported $116 billion from Korea, and US export to $65 billion to Korea. And investment is huge. The last year, the Korea invested in the United States $22 billion. So now the Korea is the sixth largest US trade partner. So investment is you can see here the historical data. So since 2016, the Korea's investment in the US exceeded $10 billion. And for the past 3 years, you can see it's more than $20 billion a year. So that's a lot. If you consider the size of the Korean economy, then that's a lot. And especially in the Korea invest in the US in the manufacturing sector. So now I like this map. It's you can see here how many Korean companies have a presence in the States, and all the red, not the red states, but red color states are in the most invested by Korean companies. So California is historically, and the Texas, Alabama, and Georgia. But not only these four states, almost all state has Korean companies, and there'll be more and more. So actually, as I mentioned, Korean investment in the U.S. Rapidly increased since 2016. But you know the IRA and CHIPS Act. We can benefit from all the the wonderful U.S. legislation. So I think that those acts accelerated Korea, not only Korea, but global companies' investment in the U.S. But there are the good sides and bad side, but we have challenges, of course. So this is really business reality. But now this year is the big election, the president election in the U.S. We know who will be the candidates, and so now the Korean companies, but not only the Korean, but all the companies which invest in the U.S. after the IRA, they are so much concerned about how what is the future of the IRA. Even if we all know that U.S. Congress cannot amend or repeal the act itself, but there can be some ways that the implementation can be changed. So without that kind of the benefits or subsidies from the U.S. government, I think the foreign companies which invest in the U.S. is really, really difficult. So that's a huge challenge for the foreign companies, of course, for the American companies as well. And nowadays, I think we are tracking some trade restrictive measures like anti-dumping or countervailing duties or safeguards, all the trade-related measures. But since last October, we can see that the number of the cases about these trade remedy cases increasing a lot. So I think many domestic manufacturers, producers, they are taking advantage of this political situation this year. So we have so much concern about that because we are here, the manufacturing, but we cannot, sourcing all the components or intermediate goods within the U.S. So anyway, we have to bring some components or the raw materials from the other countries. But if the U.S. raise the barriers, then that's all cost. So that is another concern we have. And nowadays, many people emphasize reliable and sustainable, resilient supply chain. So now, the U.S., Japan, and Korea, the allies, we are talking about how to cooperate with the resilient supply chain. But that's not we don't have any easy the answer for that. But I think without that kind of the conversation or efforts, it'll be extremely difficult to achieve this reliable supply chain in a global scale. So I will stop here.
Actually, I had a meeting with Jesse last year and also the year before. And this is the third year. We just get together and talk about their sentiment. And we don't have time even for tea or lunch. But the sentiment is really, we Korean companies become important. We got a lot of attention. So it's very complicated. We really need to navigate this situation from the stakeholder perspective. So here we'd like to invite Kevin, who is political communication expert, And please share your view of how do you navigate an election year?
Oh, well then, for those being recorded, I will hold the microphone. Thank you, Yvonne. I appreciate the invitation being here. And as you said, I'm the Chief Political Officer at DDC Public Affairs. I'm also a Professor of Congressional Behavior at American University. Yvonne and I have worked together in the past, and our firm has worked with Korean companies currently and in the past in a number of different sectors. Specifically in finance, decentralized finance and cryptocurrencies. We've worked with companies that are in the OEM space at manufacturing, and we've worked with them probably for the last decade. And I think a lot of trends have changed, and there's been a lot of inflection points that have come through, whether it's an election or just demographic shifts or whatever the news cycle, whatever the case may be. But I think there are a number of best practices that we've often talked about engaging our clients in, and our clients also have consisted of corporations, trade associations, and nonprofit groups. And I think the most important thing, as I was preparing for this panel, when I was looking at the title of it, is I think there was nuance in the chosen words there to talk about communications leadership, not to talk about, strictly comms or communications, or not to talk about public relations, or to talk about marketing for that matter, or advertising, which is the one thing we've really tried to stress with, honestly, not even just Korean companies, but any company looking to engage in the United States with American media, but also American stakeholder groups, is how can you establish yourself as a communication leader on the issues? And not allow products and services to be the tip of the spear, not to come into markets selling, not to come into markets talking about market share, things like that. But instead, how can we focus on the leadership issues and establish your spokespeople and your stakeholders as thought leaders and communicators on the issues that are critically important, and then start talking about products, then start talking about services. So US-Korean relations, global trade, global security, privacy, things like that. We seek, and I think it's a best practice that people can endeavor to take, we seek to put people in the right groups and organizations, both micro and macro, to talk about those larger issues, to be established as somebody who understands that communications is a two-way street between you and the people you're trying to communicate with, and deliver some value larger than just the products and services or ideals that a company or a corporation might be selling or working to better integrate into a US market. And when we do that, I think we've established people as better spokespeople for the groups that they're representing, and it allows them to communicate on a more human level with the people who are in the same circles, whether it's the groups that convene and meet and talk about politics, or those that convene and meet and talk about business. And it also establishes you as a source to the media, the people who ultimately are going to be writing, hopefully non-biased pieces of coverage about your companies and the way that you work and operate. Now, I personally don't think that shifts all that much in an election year. I think that the people who are out there trying to integrate themselves better into American markets have to always look at what's happening. And this is not a purely American issue, I think, but any market that's undergoing change, whether it's electoral change, demographic change, anything like that, and has to stay true to the top line messages that you think drive your company, right? The ideals that you think you represent, the culture that you think you represent and seek to put into the space, and not obviously, attach yourself to policy issues and candidates. And the same thing goes for American companies, by the way. American companies are struggling very much in the current political environment to figure out how to toe the line between engagement and not engagement. And that, I don't think that's even purely with the media as well. That's with their own consumers, and it's also with their employees. We see a significant amount of communications during an election year that speaks to, calm the nerves of employees and consumers about the fact that the person sitting in the cubicle across from you might have really deeply felt different political views than you do. So we try to really position people in that communications leadership position to talk more broadly about the things that connect us and not necessarily the things that are being voted on in an election in an election year. That's really, really hard to do. I mentioned I teach at American University as well, and I have juniors and seniors this semester, many of whom are very astute political observers, and they'll go on to great careers in politics, either elected or otherwise, and they have a hard time with that, particularly at their age, coming back and saying, how can I detach myself from the fact that I think candidate X is destroying the country, right? Or how can I detach myself from the fact that I think candidate Y undermines my true being as an individual because of the laws he or she seeks to promote? Those are great questions, right? And those are questions that I think both academically, literally, and truly people have to ask and answer for themselves. But I think companies that can then step away from that, allow people the space to determine those answers for themselves, but also continue to strive to what their company is engaged in for the future, is going to be above the fray. And I'll close with just one comment on an election year. I think there are some silver linings, particularly in a very polarized political environment that the United States is in right now. There's one big silver lining, as a matter of fact. It's that for years we've had stagnant engagement with voters. Americans did not want to participate in the political process for quite some time. We've been sub 50% voting, if not worse than that, for generations at this point. We are seeing higher degrees of people coming out to vote, to participate, to send letters and engage with their stakeholders. And they're doing that around inflection points in the election cycle. But once they've stepped into that world, and they've gotten their feet wet, so to speak, they can continue to be engaged. And what that does for companies, corporations, nonprofits, advocacy groups, is it opens up new audiences to speak with. It opens up new groups who are now engaged and care about public policy, for better or for worse. I mean, they might have entered because of the political fray, but they're there to stay, is usually the case. And we are seeing much higher rates of participation this time around. If I was predicting, I would say that the presidential race in the United States is going to have the highest turnout that we've seen in generations. I would say we're going to look at a popular vote that's probably going to be somewhat similar to what we saw previously. Unfortunately, I think with the way that we run our elections in the Electoral College, it's still really hard to say what a popular vote outcome that doesn't really determine who's going to be president, but it does determine that more people are being engaged, more audiences are opening up. And I think a company that's, or a corporation or a nonprofit that's willing to look at that and say, here are my new audiences, how do I speak to them? How do I tap into the trends that they're setting, is going to be well served.
Thank you, Kevin. So there's opportunity for us to think about engaging with new audiences, and thank you very much. And I found that what James said in his presentation, we sense some the trends coming even 10 years ago. So it's not just election years things. It's more like a mega trend. The whole are the drivers of change that give us challenges are more mega trend, and gives a very good insight. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ron, so would you add your view and recommendation on corporate public affairs expert at the federal level? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And I do work with Yvonne in our Washington, D.C. office at Fleischman Hillard, and we also partner closely with Kevin on some initiatives as well. So corporate public affairs at the federal level, as Kevin said, we really can't predict who will be the winner of the election. Like, it's very up in the air. No one can truly give you an answer right now. So companies are eager to know that. But what we're telling companies right now is to go and take a look at your own company for the next few months. Take a look at your industry, and do all that you can to insulate yourselves and to find ways that you can show leadership in the next few months and the next few years. And it's not enough to look at just what the government or the person in charge is doing. In American politics, there's so many other ways that your presence in Washington can be influenced. So take the infrastructure bill, for example. Like there's Buy America provisions, or there are people who feel differently about different imports. So looking at your industry, finding those weak spots, finding those areas for strength, that can really help you position what you're doing in the next few months, regardless of what the outcome is. And then also find ways for how your company does intersect with political leaders. So for example, one of the projects we've worked on at Fleischmann Hillard, we work with a major Asian manufacturer. They opened up a battery plant here in the US a few years ago. It was a major moment for the state. It was a huge moment for the company as well. But going forward, they have to make sure that they're meeting those benchmarks that they talked about, the number of jobs, the amount of investment they were going to have in that community, because it just doesn't impact their company or their standing. There's a good chance that governor may speak at one of the conventions this summer, and that governor will probably want to talk about that investment. So if you're not pulling through and you aren't following through on your promises, that's where it gets really, really tricky, not just for the company, but for your relationship. So that's something that we recommend that companies do as well, is really taking a look at what you're doing, how it intersects with policy, how it intersects with politics, and just finding ways that your company could truly either be attacked or uplifted. There are many, many different aspects in the US, everything from labor unions to academia, like it all intersects here in Washington, D.C. And that's what we do on the public affairs team, is we really look for ways to strengthen your reputation, find thought leadership opportunities, and ultimately advance your key business interests here in the US.
Thank you, Ron. You mentioned about convention. So actually, I visited the convention venue last week. I arrived Chicago airport last week, and I didn't go to hotel. I went to directly Milwaukee to take. I want to feel how is the convention venue look like. One of the building was renovating now, so I went to the Milwaukee convention centers and Chicago centers. So I think that July and August, it is important that we may not, get any immediate results there, but I think it's really important to understand and feel how our stakeholders are, their mindset, their status, very lively, and have a authentic dialogue. And so thank you for mentioning about convention. So Kevin, would you like to add something on the state level? You saw the map Jesse showed.
Well, yeah, engagement on a state level and communications leadership on a state level really focuses on engaging with the stakeholder groups on the ground who impact your business. A perfect example, personal example too, is I drive a Kia. I drive a Kia that was more than likely built in Georgia by Americans, yet it's considered, an international nameplate, right? We've worked very extensively with the makers of automobiles who are headquartered outside of the United States, but for the most part, built here in the United States, to tell a on-the-ground state-level story about those vehicles and about the ownership of those vehicles. And it really begins with, Ron mentioned in his talking about, whether it's academia or organized labor or whatever groups are out there, engaging people within the process to have ownership of the process, and then be able to get people on the ground to tell your story better. Obviously, stakeholders at the companies and spokespeople at the companies can be wonderful for certain opportunities. But when it comes to state level communications, authenticity is the most important thing. And if you are employing Americans, if you are working with American legislators, if you are intersecting with American media, telling your story from your employees, your leadership in the state, plant operators, things like that, has always been the most successful lane for us to be able to work with those folks. State politics are far more parochial than federal level politics. people are very interested in protecting their own or their people's and their communities' assets. It's not that federal level politics don't come down to that at the end of the day, but it's more acute at state level politics. You need to very succinctly show people in the first 3 minutes of a conversation with them why the work you're doing in their state, in their county, in their community matters to the people who pay taxes in that place. And therefore, if you can do that, how that translates into votes for them because they want to stay in office as well. So take a look at that and draw it back. Take the federal prescription and draw it a little back on the state level and realize you have to kind of get to the point a lot quicker in states than you do on a federal level. And you have to do that by telling the story in a more diverse way with different stakeholders, not simply your chief communications officer or probably certainly not your CEO.
So let's move to Dr. Kim. So I hope your urgent meeting this morning was not an real urgent.
Sorry about that.
So yesterday we discussed about our entrepreneurship, and I heard communication so many times yesterday. So leadership communication, and so how would you think about how can we the Gen 3, Gen 4 business leaders, entrepreneurs, can enhance their communication leadership in this complex world, especially in US and global.
Yeah, thank you very much. It seems like the election season has arrived again in the United States. Yes, so many things about the election, who is going to be next president in the United States. So at this moment, today's issue is a very urgent and important issue to Korea, I think. Here, why is communication leadership is important? What is the challenge of current Korean communication with the United States? Actually, yesterday we had a great meeting at the U.S. Congress about Korean entrepreneurship. It is a tremendous communication asset, I think. Then how to capitalize it into Korean asset, like the social capital or political capital asset. So then the James mentioned about emotion, attachment, right? Yeah. So I like it, this kind of approach. So I think the communication leader must be a person with a heart, yeah, rather than a leader with a lot of knowledge or information. So the knowledge, information, content without empathy, philosophy, heart became a deadly weapon. So, for example, Adolf Hitler is said to be guru or master of communication, I think. However, he is very smart, but he had no heart, no empathy with the people. So more than 50 million people died. Especially the leader. Who is a leader? So we are talking about high-tech AI, but the more high-tech we have, the more high-touch we need. So the Insula mentioned about I am because of you are. So this is a society. So this is a challenge of Korean communication to United States. First of all, communication leader must be able to empathize with the people, with the humanity. So the best way to win heart is Korean do. Do is, you know, do or 정, sentiment, attachment, heart. So then the best communication to United States is gaining heart of US people. So that we need more friendship. We need to communicate with about the mission. So today, so whenever we are having event, meeting, always I am thinking about what is our mission? Why should we be here? So without understanding mission, philosophy, actually the communicating with the communicating with them well, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a nothing, sorry about that. So then in Korean, I don't know how to translate do. It's hard, right? So then, for example, I am professor of it's actually the entrepreneurship. Then who is the best communication entrepreneur, best lead? So if I can win heart of a customer, that is the best communication with the customer, right? Or if I can gain the heart of employee, this is the best employee management. If I can win heart of investment, this is the best way to communicate with the investor. So then so we have a lot of asset. Yesterday we talked about Korean K-pop. Actually, this is a asset. Yeah. K-drama, K-kimchi, K-entrepreneurship. So how to capitalize it into social capital or political capital? So we have to think about how to emphasize this philosophy, mission with the American people. Yeah. So then so for example, in Korea, the best communication leader was King Sejong, you know. So then in United States, maybe Abraham Lincoln. Actually, I like the Lincoln very much. So I have visited in the morning, in the morning, I have visited the Lincoln Memorial again, and I have visited the Martin Luther King Memorial. So the two leaders gave me what the empathy from the Lincoln, dream from Martin Luther King. Actually, if the communication lead without the dream, without the empathy, smart people cannot be right person to communicate with them very well. So I think this is the high road maybe. So there is a two-way, high road and the low road. Low road is keep rule very well, but the high road is sharing the philosophy. So then if you can gain the heart of US people with the Korean entrepreneurship, K civilization, K kimchi, then actually I think we can capitalize it. So maybe James, actually he is a.
You almost described my book.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so actually I can guess So hopefully it can make it happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. Yesterday, our Professor Brzezinski, he gave a very good presentation, and I remember one slide that he shows that ranking of the K programs like Parasite and Tears of Kin and Physical 100. But at the end, he said, you guys are not capitalizing enough or well of the attention and attractiveness of all the key things. So today, I think it's a good start that we are see those the asset we have can transform into the social capital or political capital that works for the creating the favorable environment for business, our companies do business. And as you said, the mission and intent should be good. We should start for the good intent. All right, so James, we all know that you are a good storyteller. I know you have a good story, so you can be a good storyteller. But why? I mean, people are so Americans are love your story, and can you share some secret to the Korean business leaders, entrepreneurs, how they can say well their narrative and will resonate to from the perspective of U.S. stakeholders.
Let's see. It's hard to make everyone emotional. Like this is all. It's, do you want more of the finance, like cognitive science voice? I can give you that voice too, but it's Here's my theory. Like I haven't written a 2,000-page academic paper on immersive cog-sci emotional history of the Korean diaspora, right? But some of this is sort of instinctive and with some practice and some reading. It doesn't surprise me. I think Korean people are showing this globally, are very good at telling stories. It's one of the few cultures that has been successfully globally exported. They're very few. India, although I think Americans, we changed the name. Like Americans think, yoga is like, where'd yoga come from? I wonder, right? So, but I think Korean culture, it's been very successful in exporting Korea. And I think from my perspective, what's being exported, it's effectively like Squid Game is like Han, right? And then all the K-drama is Chung. And I think what it's really capturing is that Korean culture, we know what suffering is, actually. It's the balance with this overcoming things. And there's a certain, sometimes sadness in Korean culture, it is. And sadness is not bad. Toxic optimism is bad. I think this country has much more toxic optimism than it should. When you have toxic optimism, you don't address truth. There are a lot of sad people in this country. Instead of recognizing that, we make them angry. I think sadness is a much better emotion. So Korean people, like, generally, I think your question, Yvonne, I would like to sort of just say, like, I think the companies are doing quite a good job telling your story. So far be it from me to explain to you how to tell your story, right? So what I said there on the presentation, though, if you think about what's happening, it may be an interesting paradigm. It is not a coincidence I released this book in 2024. That's not by chance. Very intentional. This was released in 2024. It is meant to be a national dialogue. I'm asking, like, what are we doing? And if it gives you some optimism, this transcends parties. There's a reason why it is the #1 best-selling book in this country in nonfiction. It's all parties. I say the same thing in red state boardrooms, hyper-capitalists, and I get the same reaction as I do when I go into blue state. It's the same reaction. It's a very human reaction. Enough so that this past Monday, JP Morgan Chase, they threw a huge firm-wide book reception for this book, and Citi's doing it, Morgan Stanley's doing it, Principals. There are 10, 15 big companies doing this because they're finding that this unifies their employees, right? It's helping them internally. So my advice is, from a cognitive science standpoint, we know that human beings listen and remember to stories. We're just wired this way. Your hippocampus, your memory, is sitting right next to your amygdala. Your memory mechanism is sitting next to your emotional limbic system. And so my friend Dr. Zach at Claremont, right, he has a whole neuroscience philosophy of immersive neuroscience, right? Or it's like cognitive science or behavioral economics. This is not new. Like, emotions and math are always been tied. I mean, this is one of the things I have a hard time with economics, when the main hypothesis is that people are utility driven, and they're not. It's just not true. And so there's nothing profound that I'm saying. This is what's happening, though, is increasingly neuroscience. Look at Pixar, Apple, University of Berkeley is backing all of their work with neuroscience. This is Dr. Keltner's work. Like, there's not luck that Apple has been so successful, or that Steve Jobs owned Pixar as well. That's not luck. And he used a lot of Asian philosophy. Steve Jobs did, right? He was a Zen Buddhist. So just remember, like, I think your instincts on just telling a very, like, kantanan, like that simple story. That's what I'm asking. What is your company's red helicopter story? What is it? Like, why are you doing this? Why are you making the product you're making? What do you want to do for the workers' families? Why are you doing this? Why'd you open up a plant in Houston, or a plant in, why? Just, I wouldn't over orchestrate the story. It's a very just human story. And I think Korean culture is very human. It's very relatable, and it's very visceral. And so that's my answer to you, is like, it's a simple story. And once you sort of get heart and mind, the mind part, look very carefully at the way that you're accounting for your financials. Accounting, I want to say it again, it primes you to not measure certain things. And you can, right? Accounting does not measure many things. So that story, the story of your numbers, is also very important. And so even the way I structured the presentation, the first was just a red helicopter story. And then I got into deconstructed accounting later. And to your who made the point about, like, credentials? Like, I think the last thing I'll say, Yvonne, is this. I think it's in martial arts. So I met one of the founders of jujitsu, and a lot of red helicopter, the philosophy is jujitsu, where you are prepared, in balance, and you are counter moving. And so I find that in sort of these stories, and this is, across the country, it's being prepared for the reaction, is leading with heart, leading with connectedness, leading with humanity. And of course, you're ready financially. You're ready. Like, you understand the legalities and the marketing and the finance, but I don't lead with it. I'm ready, right? When the reaction comes, then I can I'll shift my voice very quickly and say, oh, okay. But once we establish the relationship, then I work with people on the numbers. So in jujitsu, it's like, you're not attacking. You're receiving, and you're using weight your way. And I think that is a more quintessentially Asian way, philosophy of doing things. So that's my answer to
Thank
the
you.
question.
I think we're on time. So I hope that you found this session valuable. And thank you all panelists for joining us on.
We probably got
Yeah.
time for one question.
Okay.
The burning question that you want to answer, because this is an all-star panel, outstanding, and we wouldn't want to not, I see this one. Please introduce yourself. Please introduce yourself and your question, please.
Thank you. My name is Fatima Abdullah. I worked for a long time in global Korean companies, and going to the earlier comments about building political capital. I always found the success of Korean companies and Korea in general is that it doesn't get involved in these types of situations or tough political times or whatever it may be. It's one of the rare countries that doesn't have problems with almost any other country. So maybe a little bit sometimes with the North, maybe. So how do you like interpret that with your comments about trying to build political capital? Because the Korean strategy is actually very successful.
Well, is it to me?
No, in
To
general.
all, right. So actually, I just want to make a comment on the political or the capital, that it was because the professor was Brzezinski was in history, so he he used that term political capital, but I mean, from the business side, it's true that we are, bipartisan and very much focusing on our customers and our key stakeholders, and try to build more shared value between the society and the companies, the mission and stakeholder together engaged. So that's what I think, companies and most of the global companies, of course, Korean companies are in that stance. I hope that answered. Okay, so from today's session, I learned that that we should not waste our time and resource by projecting who's gonna win, right? We have to focus on understanding the mindset or emotional status of our important stakeholders, and understand whether there's a gap of their understanding and our narrative, and try to deeply analyze what if it's not aligned. That is our mission in this election year, before election. And as James finalized, let's think about what is my red helicopter story, and what is my company's red helicopter story, and what is our industry's red helicopter story. Because there are a lot of changes in new technology coming, ecosystem is evolving every day, and we may not have control of the change. Let's think about the happy or future focused red helicopter story, and let's build up your own red helicopter story before election start, voting date. So thank you very much for panelists for joining us today. Thank you. Thank you. I think we should take a photo.
Okay,
Yeah.
before you leave, we have awards to give out for your participation. We want to really thank you for this discussion. We could go on and on because we have some of the leading thought thinkers here. Communications, we heard about hearts. I remember we used to use the term the hearts and minds, and so we have, for each one of you, to thank you for your participation. We want to present you with a token of our appreciation, and then we want to take a group picture. And we want to take a group picture. And so let's gather around. Let's gather around, and so Kevin, Vaughn, Jesse, we have a group picture. Okay. Let's give a big round of applause for this year. And we're going to break for 30 minutes. Now we're going to break and please feel free if you have some time. I know they don't in the audience. Of course, I want to go. Yeah, yeah. I have to take books. Please say one for me. I need to get out of right now. Yeah. I gotta get on the conference call. Okay. I'm gonna give it to you. He was.
Yeah. I speak German, I sound very nice, and I am German speaking too. Can you write, so I just, yes, I met you yesterday, but I have my first one, say something like. Anna. Yeah. I looked it up. Okay. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
It sounded interesting. I really. And we're doing them in order. Bob and the.
License fee, W. Never been in this room? I love it. I have to measure everything, but. Really not loud. Appreciate your time. Sharing your insights. Yes. Yeah.
Especially at this age.
Few more folks. I have one for you. I have a couple more. Hey. It's okay.
This guy, I'm gonna be like.
I don't know. I'm running the show. Yep. We can stop. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, everyone was fine. Yeah, yeah, well, I got it. Can I have an email to send it to? Yeah. Maybe we have time, somewhere later, it's where.
Yeah, yeah. So should I start? Should I start? Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. We're about to. Hello. We're about to start the next session. Could everyone take your seats, please? I don't have a gavel. Could everyone take your seats, please? We're about to start. The next session will start soon. This is a plenary session. We were treated for those of you who missed the first session. We had an extraordinary speaker in Mr. James Rhee, and of course, we had an outstanding panel to talk about communications. And so, this has been a great day, and there are great speakers to come. The next speaker for plenary session is from the GW Office of Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And we will focus on a spotlight on South Korea. And so I'm pleased to introduce to you Associate Vice President Jim Chung and Kerry Slattery. Their topic is South Korea Innovation Ecosystem, Building and Global Perspective. And so please give a big round of applause for Jim and Kerry.
Sure. So we're actually going to come up in order. So I'll be going first. Then we've added Bob Smith to our well. All right, good. So can you all hear me? And how do I advance the slides with this? Okay, great. Thanks. All right, great. So hello, everyone. My name is Jim Chung. This isn't advancing. There we go. So I click this.
I think you do this now. It's just I had touched.
Okay. Oh, okay, great. So my name is Jim Chung. I am the Associate VP for Research, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship here at GW. I've been in this position now for over 14 years. Been very privileged to have this platform, and through working with GW, I've done some pretty cool things with Korea, and so I'll be talking about that. I'm also the co-principal investigator for the NSF I-Core Hub in the Atlantic region, and something I've been involved in since 2011, and we'll talk about that later. Bob will primarily talk about that. Before coming to GW, I was a former venture capital, private equity, and corporate M&A investor, and current angel investor now. And because we have a Korean crowd here, I got to talk a little bit of my educational cred. Went to Stanford and MIT, was a Fulbright fellow at University of Tokyo, and have been a research fellow at Harvard, and actually a few Korean institutions as well, at Etri, KAIST, and STEPI. So that's my background. One thing I like to do when I get up here is to brag a little bit about GW in terms of its innovation. Most people, when they think of GW, they think of our law school, our public policy, our hospital and medical school. But we're also one of the leading universities around innovation. So especially our alumni founders, We are in the top 25 universities globally for unicorn founders. And in the top 53 worldwide for venture-backed startup founders. I see in the audience, we have one of our student founders over there. Anna, if you want to raise your hand. She's well on her way to being one of these future unicorn founders, I'm sure. We've also been in the top 10 for licensing revenue per research expenditure in 2020. We are not in that level every year, but we did hit that one year. We do run one of the #1 student new venture competitions in the country. Because of our activities through the I-Corps with our faculty, with our students, we have launched through our office in some way or another through helping with our students and faculty directly 350 startups since 2010 and $1.8 billion in follow-on funding, 2,500 jobs created. And that's just for GW students and faculty that have gone through our program. There's other students and faculty who do things outside. So the number in terms of impact of GW is even larger than what I'm showing here. The Office of Innovation and Entrepreneurship is around fostering innovation entrepreneurship, primarily for our students and faculty. So our main mission is to get their ideas out of the classrooms and the labs and into the real world. We do this by supporting their innovation, by helping with education. We work very closely with the business school, actually with all the schools at GW to make sure that our students have the skills they need to be innovative and entrepreneurial in no matter what they do, whether they're launching a political campaign, whether they're launching a product out of an existing company, or they're trying to start up their own company. And then we actually do help them with starting up their own companies through venture creation programs like our new venture competition, like some of the programs that we'll be talking about later. And we also provide connections to the people in our community. So connecting investors to our entrepreneurs, connecting faculty researchers to startups and companies that are looking to license or use their expertise. So our program, especially since we're talking about international programs, has been very successful. We've done over 45, I think this is a little outdated, we've probably done over 50 international programs. In terms of capacity building, we not only directly train entrepreneurs, but we also train the trainers. So we have been doing a lot of the training the trainers as well as ecosystem building around the world. And so our global entrepreneurship network that we've built out is really focused on 4 different things. One is this ecosystem development. The second is lean startup training. So this is about teaching our researchers, our innovators, no matter what field they're in, to think like entrepreneurs, to make sure that they're not building something that nobody wants, but that they're understanding who their customers are, so that they will make sure that what they're building is on target. We also believe that mentorship is extremely important to what our innovators are doing. So we have a whole set of mentorship and instructor programs that Bob will talk about later in more detail. And then finally, we have for foreign startups who want to launch here in the United States, a number of different soft landing programs, and Carrie will talk about those later. But I'd like to highlight one of our flagship programs. And I'm very happy to say that our partners, the Korea Innovation Center, Washington, D.C. president is here. Sean Ryu, you want to raise your hand? And Ryan as well from the KIC. We have been working with KIC Washington, D.C. since 2015. So almost 10 years now, working on programs to help Korean innovators understand what their inventions and what their research could do in the United States. So they actually come here to Washington, D.C. in the summer for 3 weeks, get trained by Bob, Kerry, our mentor network, bring in student translators from GW and actually across the country, because it's such a great learning opportunity. And we've trained over 1,500 participants from Korea through the KIC program. You see on there some photos there of some of the different cohorts that we've had over the years. That one in the top middle, we actually have the head of the Korean National Research Foundation had come out to the kickoff of the original one in 2015. I'd like to brag again, if you will indulge me. I found out from KIC just a couple days ago that one of the teams from our first cohort in 2015, you can see it's team number 8. This is their actual student slide when they came in and they were first introducing themselves. You can see here that they put themselves in that bottom right photo there. And then the bottom left, they got Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. So they were not being very humble at all. They were saying, this is what we aspire to. We're going to be the next Steve Jobs and next Steve Wozniak. Well, I heard from KIC just a couple of days ago that they are going public next month on COSDEC. And you can see here now, this is their photo. It looks a lot more formal than the one they put on there about Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. But those are two of the co-founders that were originally in the program back in 2015. These are some of their products. They won the computer, the big convention in Las Vegas, CES, a couple of years ago, I think. So this is an example of the types of teams that have come through our program from Korea that have gone off and done really well. I think this is the third. Is this a third public company coming out of KIC? Sean, is that right? Is that at least the second or third? I think it's a third. And we've got around 50 or so other companies that have come out of this program. Again, an amazing partnership and track record working with KIC to bring these. Last year, we had 72 teams come out from Korea for this program. Oh, and Vivian, I should mention Vivian over there as well from KIC. So that's it for my introduction. We'll get into the kind of meat and potatoes now and bring up my colleague, Bob Smith. Thank you.
I don't know if I should be offended that I'm the meat and potatoes. Don't have the fat guy up there and say he's the meat and potatoes.
Meant it in the best way.
You can see the things that I do here. I think the biggest thing that we try to emphasize is I won't read to you my academic achievements because they're not as stellar as Jim's. I came here as an entrepreneur and investor. That's all I've done my whole life, startups. And I love doing startups, and that's why Jim brought me in, and I'm happy to do that here at our school. What I will talk about is mastering the clicker. Is this the right clicker?
Arrow, keyboard arrows.
Yeah, I would do keyboard.
Oh, the keyboard arrow, so I'm sorry, okay. So let me first talk about the National Science Foundation I-Corps a little. I am the director of the I-Corps program here at George Washington, and it'd be good to tell you a little bit about how that came about. It came about from Stanford. I was just speaking to a university in Finland just before I got here. And it was funny because they kept saying, well, we took this from Stanford, we took that from Stanford, we took this from Stanford. And we like to think we do a lot of stuff better than Stanford. And one of them is implement their I-Corps program. So we've been doing that. Jim was one of the, Jim was one of the first instructors. I was very close to that. I've been doing I-Corps instruction for a while. What is it? Well, it basically is designed to try to teach a researcher how to think like an entrepreneur. The sort of, and what's interesting about this is based on the same kind of experimental concepts. How can you frame the experiment? Startup business is very much an experiment. An experiment where you want to control variables. You want to understand who am I trying to sell to and what am I trying to do with them? How can I make their life a little better and so forth. And the idea here was to take that to researchers that might view the world very much through a prism of the inventor. And if you think about the difference between an inventor and somebody who's an entrepreneur, an inventor sees the intrinsic capabilities of the thing they've created. An entrepreneur has to look for the value and the benefit they can create for the person who has to adopt that invention. So at its core, that's what I-Corps tries to do. It tries to teach the inventor how to think like an entrepreneur, to understand only through delivering value to a customer do you succeed in creating enterprise value or those unicorns that everybody likes to tout so much. The other thing that's really interesting about I-Corps, not only the methodology, which I won't go too deeply into, but if anybody ever wants to listen, we do regular programs all the time to talk about it. But it's as an ecosystem development concept, what I-Corps was all about. And it's really powerful in the sense that it takes a very simple concept, this lean startup concept of experimentation to try to find the right customer, the right time, the right go-to-market strategy, leverages across multiple universities the expertise. And so you unite a network, and these little dots there are the network of schools that are part of this. And what it does is it says through this one simple idea, this lean startup methodology, we basically can connect an entire nation's innovation ecosystem. And it's done quite well at that. It's produced a lot of excellent teams and really sort of changed the nature of entrepreneurship training in the US, which is why we've been very happy to be a part of it for so long. Think about it this way and how it works in a regional context. So we're part of the Mid-Atlantic I-Corps Hub. And that means that ourselves, along with University of Maryland, Johns Hopkins University, North Carolina State, UNC, University of North Carolina, and others, Penn State, Carnegie Mellon, pretty broad network region. What we do is we can hold cohorts where we can bring all these schools together virtually so that all the innovators from those places come, and we don't have to recreate the program for every little university and every little program. By pooling these resources and using a common methodology, we can bring a hub-wide virtual program together and train all these students and all of these teams with a very high touch component. In other words, very high touch meaning very low ratios to student and faculty. Usually in ours, it's a 1 to 3, it's a 1 to 4 relationship between our mentors and the teams that they're teaching. So it's a very leverageable, very cost efficient, and very effective program. So in GW, that is the foundation of all we do. Keep in mind, though, that the actual I-Corps teams that we serve is a very limited number. I-Corps in the formal sense of working with somebody that's using university-based research. We work with a number of them, but we work with the entire student population, and being one of those, one of my most cherished mentees. So we had to develop something that, how do you work with everybody in the university at different stages from all different disciplines without losing the impact of the I-Corps program? And that's this team development program. And I'll go through it quickly, and then I'll go through it slowly, if you stand with me. What we do is we look for places where we're going to interact with people first. And I will talk about that mostly here. We interject ourselves into programs at every school on campus through multiple classes, through these things called classroom modules, for one, where we inject a little bit of this I-Corps philosophy and this lean startup philosophy into programs ranging from public health, medical school, multiple programs in the business school, multiple programs in the engineering school, and so forth. In addition to that, we do regular programs school-wide that are not geared at researchers and not geared at entrepreneurs at all. All they're geared at is the idea of innovation using this lean startup process. So we get art students, we get everybody. And people come from all over the world. It's totally free when you go back, if you'd like to wherever, South Korea or wherever. Your students can join, you can join. We do the third Friday of every month for about an hour. Central to what we do, though, is, and then for the general student population, and many of these are targeted for different schools, we host events continuously. And we're always trying to insert ourselves, bring people in. But ultimately, the real juice of our program starts with the mentorship. I'm going to talk a little bit more about mentorship, but we try to get them to a mentor early. No matter what the status of their idea is, no matter what stage of development, it can be pure R&D. It can be thinking about what's the next grant I apply for. Doesn't matter. We want them thinking in terms of what's the broader impact of this idea the second they're having it. And for a student that's not deep tech, not necessarily ever going to be venture funded, it's the same process. We don't change anything. All we do is get to them early and start talking about their ideas and how they want to change the world. All of our students have the opportunity to participate in our new venture competition. On an annual basis for us, sort of the culmination of all of our mentor work and all of the work we do throughout the school. Over 500 students took part in it this year. Quite often, it's a faculty member that's looking at their technology and they put it in, and this program lasts really all year long. And we start from fundamentals like forming their idea, being able to pitch just a very short elevator pitch to make sure they can actually articulate the concept they wanted to use to innovate. That moves into another phases where we start to get much more deeply into how do you build financials for a startup? How do you do all the different elements? So that when they get to the end of the year, they're doing a very broad pitch competition. And as Jim said, it's one of the top, if not the top, one of the top ones in the country. For our faculty members, oh no, I'm one off. Everyone that goes through that wants to go to a more advanced level, and let's face it, most people don't necessarily want to go to an advanced level. They like the idea of innovation and entrepreneurship. Well, our philosophy is entrepreneurs do work. Entrepreneurs don't sit in classes all day. Entrepreneurs get out and get their hands dirty. So we make everybody that wants to enter into the really intensive part of the team development program to attend our I-Core regional short course. This is much like Jim was mentioning the KIC program. Folks that are come over, we do the identical thing with our own faculty and students. And that is they're in a 2-week period. They go through an intensive piece of instruction. And then most importantly, they go out and they have to find 20 interviews in the sector they want to go into. And we make them do the work. Because I can tell you, as somebody who's probably been in more startups than most people you know, nobody does it for you. There is no handbook. The entrepreneur has to learn how to go out and talk to their potential. And they have to run these experiments. We help them, we guide them, but we make sure those people do it. So this is a hurdle for them to get through. That goes to National I-Core. That's the National I-Core program that specifically for our researchers. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. For more advanced teams who do our industry advisory panels, I will talk about them as well. That's getting into the way to think about it is a virtualized asynchronous incubator. Basically an incubation program, but not time gated or anything. It's sort of helping teams develop their step-by-step go-to-market strategy. We also do our community meetups with our overall group. And our goal here from this whole program is to take people that go through this and ultimately give them to an accelerator. Because you should, as a person who started one of the first accelerators in the world, I can tell you that you don't want to go to an accelerator if you don't know what direction you're going. Think about it. You're in your car. You don't know what direction you're going. You never hit the accelerator. So we want to get them to the point where they know where they're going. They know how they're going to get there, and then they're ready to accelerate. During this period of time, as the team develops over time, they're hitting these major milestones to building a business plan. They're building not a business plan because that's a static thing we don't have them do, but an actual targeted go-to-market strategy where they know their first customer, they know how they're going to reach them, and so on and so forth. But in our program, because we believe that you can't learn this from a book and you can't learn it from a Google search, you have to go out and talk to people. During this period of time, they're doing a lot of these interviews. Like I said, the first step we start everybody on, and the entire program is held together by our mentorship philosophy. We will talk to them from the earliest phases of their idea. We don't care if this is a venture financeable idea. Like I said, we just talk to people who want to innovate. Because one of the things that we've learned over the years, Jim was talking about all the great numbers that we have and the number of teams we've created and all the investment in them, and it's very true. But I can tell you that almost none of those teams started their idea here. What they've learned is how to be an entrepreneur here. And I can tell you as somebody that's done repeated startups, most serious entrepreneurs don't do one, they do many. So if you train the entrepreneur, you're going to get repeated benefit from that as that person does. Like I said, we do programming all year long, and we look at different segments of our population, from people that are in an ideation phase of their development to somebody who's actually inventing and coming up with a solution, to somebody who's actually in an incubation period for their startup. And we tailor our programming for all of that. My colleague, Kate Keith, who's not here today, runs a lot of these programs to develop skills in terms of not only how to pitch your deck, but skills in terms of how to do the proper research, how to build a board, how to do financials, and so on and so forth. That all leads to this new venture competition that I talked about. There's me right there. Anna was one of our winners, and she's doing a great job continuing to advance her idea. The 2-week boot camp works sort of like this. There's an intensive 3-day lecture period, but it's only half days. And of the half day, there's only about half of that that's actual lecture. What we really want to do is start the entrepreneurs that would-be entrepreneurs doing the work. And all of the work we have them do in the initial phases, the initial phase of the teaching, those first 3 days, is defining the hypotheses that are core to their business. Because if you don't know what you're looking for, you can't find it. Customer discovery is a means of validating your hypothesis. So if you can't state a good hypothesis, you can't find what you're looking for. So like I said, this is a scientific approach to doing this. After that, they go away for a week and they do interviews, much like our KIC participants. After that first week, they get to critique. We never criticize, we critique. Mostly that's about, well, who did you talk to? Why did you talk to them? What did you learn? How did you, and teaching them how to extract insights, what to look for. We have a rule generally that if you don't do the work, we don't do the work. So if somebody comes and says the dog ate my homework, the sun was in my eyes, it's like, you know, students know that one all the time. They don't get any help. We'll give them some guidance. We'll say next week, try to work on this because, again, I can tell you from deep personal experience, if you don't do the work, it doesn't get done when you're doing startups. So we try to just do that to foster it. It's not criticizing them. It's not being punitive to them, but it does tell them this is how this works if you want to really do this for real. At the end, they do another week of that, and then we critique them again. We give them first guidance for what they should do in the next step of their development. This was the I-Corps program. I won't talk specifically about, well, I think the important thing to recognize about the I-Corps program here, if they've gone through that short course and they're a researcher or faculty member with deep tech, we can send them to the National I-Corps program. And that's a grant program at its foundation. And so these researchers can get $50,000 to continue their customer discovery work. And we help administer that and we prepare the teams for that. GW, I can say, I'll do my brag. Jim was doing some brags. We consistently have the best teams in the national cohorts. It's consistently rated. Our teams are generally rated the best. And it's because of this whole process we do. Now to the real meat of the meat and potatoes. I guess this is like the sort of tenderloin portion of the whole thing. And so from all the things we do, we help prepare them, help them sort of frame their ideas. But now you got to make those ideas work. There's, as you all know, you probably run innovation centers or incubation or accelerators or something. And there's dozens, oodles of them out there. Ours is a little different. And the way we do it is, one of the problems that startups tend to do is they tend to go and first thing, I need an advisory board. I need to go out and get an advisory board. I need to get a lot of people that are advising me. And I need to go and get people to help me. And I'll give them equity. It doesn't matter. Well, the thing is you generally don't know too much when you start out. So what you do is you form corporate structures prematurely. And you don't really know, did I get the right people in? So what we do is we form an advisory panel for each team that is more committed and continuing on with us. We meet regularly with them, and each time we meet, we give them more guidance on what to do next. So you completed this task, you did what we said last time, you've given us your feedback from your customer discovery interviews, seen the progress you made, and then what we say is, good, here's another goal, go get it. About every other month, we meet with the teams, and this little board works around. What we're going to do is, on top of that, is build subject matter expert boards and industry expert panels, so that as our teams go through, we can sort of control access to the market, guide the conversations, but bring that kind of expertise in, and that also gets our alumni to working with us and so on and so forth. And of course, we bring people in from the different schools that are around campus, like the business school and the technical expertise from the engineering school and so forth. But the whole idea is that when you do a startup, what happens is you get a very little bit of money. And each little bit of money somebody gives you is another experiment. They say, well, can you get a customer? Yes, I can get a customer. Oh, can you get a customer regionally? Yes, I can get a customer regionally. Can you get a customer nationally? Yes, I can get a customer nationally. So you want to teach startups how to think that way, how to think with real strong objectives, achieve little victories, not massive victories, because all those little victories ultimately add up. The team that Jim just showed from Korea started in 2015 in the program here. They went into the Great Korean ecosystem, but it still took all these years to build it to be the company that it is now. So we don't rush it. And by doing that, we give the teams a lot of help, and it's customized to them. It's not cohort format. It's tailored to the individual company going through. So this guide gives you, this slide gives you kind of an idea of how that evolves over time. When they start, they come to us with very rough ideas. We get through customer definition. We get to focus on who's the go-to-market segment. And as we develop that team, they're validating that, usually changing it, because as we tell startups, you're usually 50% wrong about everything when you're in a startup. The only problem is you don't know where you're wrong and you don't know why you're wrong. So over time, that road gets a little windy. It's not completely a linear straight line, but where it ultimately leads to is well-funded companies, well-prepared companies, and that's our goal. And like I said before, most importantly, well-trained entrepreneurs that are ready for whatever they do, whether it's working in a company, whether it's doing startups or so forth. So I talked about the national program. I-Corps. Well, one of the things we did, I did it, but GW was partners on it when I was at George Mason University, is to take this concept and use it as a regional economic development force. And that program is called the ICAP program in the state of Virginia. And I started it when I was working at the Small Business Development Center in the state of Virginia. And that's why I was asking our guests from that we just met with, well, are you doing regional economic development? Because we've done a lot of that through this. This program was founded with the help of not only Mason University and GW, but the National I-Corps program, of course, because that was the basis of the teaching, and the Small Business Administration of the U.S. What we did is we tied together a network of schools, economic development organizations, and so forth in the state of Virginia. It's all the accelerators modeled on the I-Corps program. And again, using the simple sort of organizing principle of lean startup and mentorship as a means of tying together an entire ecosystem. So with very little, so that meant we had to have the destination base. So by working with the downstream folks of the accelerators, we could get teams that weren't quite ready for them, prepare them, and then give them back. And it now is instituted in Virginia that pretty much every first-time entrepreneur has to go through the ICAP program now in order to get money from the state. And most of the accelerators in the state look to the ICAP deal flow in order to populate their accelerators. So as part of this, we put together a network of every university in the state. And again, what we found was every university in the state was all doing the same thing. They all wanted to have an innovation center. They all wanted innovation centers to work a certain way. And we said, well, look, we'll do one thing for you so you can do all the other stuff. And the one thing we'll do is we'll do a mentorship program and teaching lean startup. And they all bought it and they all came in. The same thing with economic development people. These are regional chambers of commerce. This is the Small Business Development Center network and so forth. All around the state, special things like special state programs for innovation, all linked together into this network. So by putting all those folks together, and with very little money and in a very short period of time, ICAP became the fundamental largest entrepreneurship program in the state of Virginia, maybe one of the biggest incubators in the world. We did that very simply through the principles I talked about, those same principles that started with I-Corps and that developed through our team development program, implemented on a statewide basis. And you can see over $170 million has been raised. It's well over 1,000 teams now that have been through it. And the number of counseling hours is one of the key metrics we looked at. How much time do you actually spend with a startup? And you can see it's over 26,000 hours of mentoring help. And we have similar stats on that amount of time we spend with those startups here that really helps us achieve what we're trying to achieve. But remember, they do work. And so it's been fairly successful. So I think that's me, right? So now I'm going to bring up Carrie Slattery from our office, and don't forget the down. And she will finish off and talk about our soft landing. Yeah, the down.
Okay, I am the fun final 5 minutes. So we get to have some fun. And even though I will be discussing the US market aspect of what we do, We also go in country to various countries and help them develop their local ecosystem, even if they're not looking to enter the US market. We do the same trainings there and here. But yes, this QR code will become important. This is why any of this matters to you. I'm gonna really drive that point home, but I'll show the QR code again at the end. This is to stay in touch of what we're launching in the future of our office and where we're also headed. So who are we? Again, GW and our office at GW is incredibly unique for a university, an American university, in that most universities will, they're usually in a rural part of the country, and we are in the capital. But B, most of their innovation offices are staffed with academics, and their focus is on internal faculty and students. GW is one of the few universities in the country, one of the few I-Corps universities in the country, I think only 2 or 3, who offer programs externally to our external partners, including internationally. So it's a great opportunity. I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that we are in Washington, DC. We're a very international school in a very international city. And again, we are not academics. So our office is full of investors, serial entrepreneurs, industry mentors, subject matter experts, and we essentially specialize in connections here in Washington, DC. So those can be connections to federal agencies. I'll talk about that more. FDA regulation, intellectual property lawyers, et cetera. So we're very well connected, and also the university is staffed by experts in many, many fields: AI, cyber, any vertical that you can think of. There are GW experts here who help us do it. So again, I'm not going to go over things we've already learned from Bob, but we do establish long-term relationships with our teams years in order to help them build their business model. And then also, as a higher education institution, we would never take equity. We are there to help them. So we do institutional partnerships, and we also do partnerships with individual startups. This slide right here is about our institutional partnerships. So we work in countries around the world, usually through ministries of education, ministries of science and technology, ministries of commerce, but also individually with partner universities. Bob and I fly around the world. So you can see us in Armenia. You can see us in the country of Georgia. We welcome Ukraine business leaders. In the middle are researchers from Mongolia. One of our big institutional partnerships has been with GKEF, and we help train their trainers. And sorry, that's fine. I'm like, honestly, I feel like Taylor Swift right now with all the photos being taken of me. So it's fine. But we helped train GKEF's trainers and Korean Entrepreneurship Foundation. And obviously, as Bob mentioned and Jim mentioned, our biggest program is with the universities in Korea and that summer program where they come over here. So it's our biggest institutional program. But we've been all over, and we also work with individual startups. So besides the ecosystem building, which is what we've been talking about, and actually it was GKEF who we helped guide on building their ecosystem in Korea from the ICAP model that Bob talked about in Virginia. So this has been a long-term partnership, 10, 15 years. But then with our individual startups and the US market. So as you know, a lot of South Korean products now in the US market. Parasite won the Academy Award. You've got K-pop music, you've got all the cosmetic companies, K-dramas, a lot of Korean startups looking to enter the US market. How does our office help them do that? Well, I told you about all the connections and investors and mentors we have, but I like to joke that our offerings for startups come in small, medium, and large. So small is, if you are a startup who thinks you might want to enter the US market, but you're not sure how close or how far away you are from doing that, the best thing we offer is one of our industry advisory panels. We can do it virtually, and it's only half a day to a full day online. Essentially, a startup team will present a report of where they're at, a template that we give them. And there will be a lot of Q&A with our investors and experts. And what they will receive after sort of an evaluation of what their US market entry strategy, where they're at in that process, and what they would need to do next, and what kind of connections they would need. We provide them a formal report with all of that information. That's sort of our small. And then the medium offering is for startups who for sure want to enter the US market, and they need more of a 6-month long-term, preferably in-country mentorship and incubation program, which we also provide. And then the large offering, which is, well, actually, we just had a big launch last week. And I believe a lot of people learned about it this morning from a presentation Jim Chong gave in our offices. But Washington, D.C. now has a consortium, and we're calling it the GW Penn West Global Build Fellowship, which is a lot of words. But all you need to know is that this fellowship program provides international startups with a visa, with a co-working space in the heart of downtown, with our advisory panels included all together. And you can see on this list, the consortium partners are marshaling resources to downtown DC for the purposes of making entry into the United States on the East Coast easier and more beneficial for foreign entrepreneurs. So real quick, we've got the Washington, D.C. Economic Partnership, the Deputy Mayor's Office, the Golden Triangle Business Improvement District, the Penn West Equity and Innovation District, our GW University, and which is important that we are there in this consortium, because in order to receive this special H-1B visa, you need a university affiliation and to be an entrepreneur. So we are key in this consortium. And then we have affiliates. So the DC Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Washington, DC Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Washington Black Chamber of Commerce, et cetera, et cetera. So I leave you with why DC, because everyone wants to talk about Silicon Valley. No, no more. Silicon Valley is oversaturated. And actually what we offer here in the heart of Washington, DC is invaluable connections, particularly to certain federal agencies or regulatory agencies like the FDA. So as you know, DC, we have more than 175 embassies here. We have over 500 multinational corporations. The World Bank is on GW's campus. The IMF is on GW's campus. We have connections to the Department of Defense, NASA, FDA. And when I say we, I mean George Washington University. So this is the place where key decision makers are shaping policy, including business policy, including international business policy. So forget about Silicon Valley. Again, if you'd like to know more about what we're launching in the upcoming semester around all of these offerings, feel free to scan this QR code or come and talk to me, because there's some exciting things coming this way for hopefully South Korean entrepreneurs. All right, thank you.
Yes, well, we will have lunch, but we would be remiss with all the information that's provided if we didn't give time for a few questions. If you have a question, please turn on your microphone. You introduce yourself and ask the question. Okay. Okay. Well, you know, I'll ask the question. Since Jim, you mentioned the I-Corps. I was there when we hired Errol Arkalik, because I was at the NSF. So you worked with professors, and in terms of IP, does the university work with the technology that's spun out in terms of intellectual property, working with them? Is that tied in with the patent office at all? Do you invest?
So traditionally,
Yeah.
the I-Core researchers
Yeah,
have not been required to have, filed a patent or anything like that. In fact, the I-Core, we actually teach them not to talk about their technologies in order not to invalidate any kinds of intellectual property claims. There is a new program that is out right now under a pilot called the Excel Core program. They just received a grant. One of our former colleagues, Joe Chang, who's now at the University of Illinois, has a grant for that, where we are looking at intellectual property and how that's handled within the I-Core program and afterwards. So that is something that is being newly incorporated into the NSF programs.
okay,
I'm actually going to be giving the talk on the intellectual property aspects of it for the Excel Core.
okay.
In a
And
couple months.
when you think of I-Core, I also think of the pathway to the SBIR, STTR program as well. And for those of you, that's also a way that companies are started. And so, there's something called the Bayh-Dole Act. Back in 1980, Bayh-Dole was passed by the U.S. government, and it came about because before Bayh-Dole, only 4% of all technologies that were patented by U.S. government were licensed. Not too many people would license technology because it was owned by the U.S. government. But then Bayh-Dole came about in 1980, which allowed the inventor to take ownership. And then, of course, that really took off. And so with regard to technologies do you have co-working spaces for those? Because you mentioned that there's someone here who is a founder and her technology's taken off. How does the university work with companies? Is there space off campus? Is there an incubator? How does that work?
We do not have our own on-campus incubator, and it's something that I would love to see the university get behind. But we do operate actually out of a co-working space where students can access the space during office hours. And some of our student entrepreneurs do enter the co-working space after they graduate and when they launch their company. So that's accessible. What Carrie was talking about was our new DC Global Soft Landing program. That is also within a co-working space. And through the programs that we've developed, there is a discount for founders who are coming through our programs to enter that co-working space. But we don't offer free space.
Okay,
If you look around, it's a little expensive real estate around here.
Okay.
But yes.
Okay. Yes, Mr. John Choi?
I'm
Please.
John Choi. I'm working for Hyundai Motor Jeongbong Foundation. We've been also supporting Korean startup since 2012. So your presentation was very interesting for us. But we selected a lot of Korean startups, but they tried to enter United market, but it was not easy for us because of everything. So you mentioned the visa program. So if one of my team wanna apply to that visa program, what's gonna be the eligible?
Yes. So it's actually active. The program, as I mentioned, was launched, I think, last week. So the QR code that Carrie had up on that screen, it should also bring you to the application for the Global Build Fellowship. So you go on there, you apply to the program on there. We don't actually process the application. Our partners at the Open Avenues Foundation will process the application. There are certain eligibility requirements, but the bottom line is if you're a real startup, raised at least $250,000, you want to launch your company here in Washington, D.C. We're not going to give you a visa to go to Silicon Valley. You have to come here to Washington, D.C., and you will take the programming that Carrie and Bob talked about. Then you can get an H-1B visa. There are, of course, fees that are required to manage the visa process and monitoring, et cetera. But it's a very unique program. I think that we've already had a lot of interest from Korean startups. One of the Korean VC has already said that they will send 5 teams a year through our program. And I think DC is a very good place for certain startups that would benefit from being in this area, working with federal agencies, the international organizations, and GW.
Okay, great. Well, I asked Jim, Bob, and Carrie to come up front. We want to take a picture, but also I have a presentation to make. So please come up. Well, we'll be in front. I just want to thank you for your presentations. It was very, very informative. I was told that Jim, you do so many things. Bob, you're the meat and potatoes guys. But an investor, yeah. But I was told that Carrie, you're going to work with the Jinju Forum. Yeah, you were nominated to work with Jinju Forum. Well, we have something that Taylor Swift doesn't have, and this is a token. This is a token from Jinju. This is Hummel, so we want to give it to you since you're going. So we want to thank you again. Let's give a big round of applause for this great presentation. Yeah, yes. And for Carrie as well, we have this award, the 224 Global Korean Entrepreneurship Forum for your keynote talk.
Oh, that is for me because it's got my name on it.
Yes, it is for you, and so we'll take a picture. Yes, of course. Well,
I wanted to test it out.
It's quality.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I believe that we are now breaking for lunch. So now we have a break for lunch, and please feel free to mingle. And for those of you who were not here this morning, you missed a great presentation by Mr. James Reed. He brought books. He may be out of books. His book is a bestseller. And so if you get a chance to talk with him and mingle, this is a lot to discuss. So